Now, next up, it's a true honor to have a very well-known personality, especially from here in Austin, but worldwide as well. He's the CEO and founder of Onnit, and he really epitomizes what this conference is about. He's about human potential, about what's possible, the what if of everything. And he has done a lot of N of one work on himself. And so he's going to talk to us about this whole, I guess, really a mindset shift around the N of one, the sovereign individual taking that what if to its greatest potential. So, Aubrey Marcus, thank you for coming.
Yeah, how's everybody doing? Good? So it's the end of the day. You guys have heard a lot of science from some incredibly brilliant people. I'm blown away by the people that are here right now, and I've learned so much from so many of them. So I figure I'm just gonna tell you guys some stories. And we're gonna talk about some stories about some experiences that I've been through. Because as you see all around you and so many of the things you heard, there's amazing advancements in medicine and technology that can really up-level our potential. And that's all really important. But what I've gotten really curious about, particularly lately, is the medicine that's all around us. And some of this medicine has been known, well, most of this medicine has been known for a long time, for thousands of years. And it's the medicine of cold, heat, breath, and darkness. And that medicine, when taken in high enough quantities, can be quite profound. And I'm sure you guys have heard about all of the benefits of heat therapy and all the benefits of cold therapy, but perhaps not in a more ritualistic sense. And so that's where I'm gonna start before going into the other forms of medicine. Because if you really look, everyone can be our teacher, everything can be our medicine if we pay attention. Even that annoying person that's next to you, annoying, they're teaching you something. They're your teacher. That person who inspires you, they're your teacher. There's medicine in every place you look. There's medicine in McDonald's if you look hard enough. It's there. I haven't found it myself, but I trust that the enterprising individuals in here could find it. So when I talk about heat, obviously, we know a lot of the benefits that happen, so I'm not gonna bore you going through my amateurish rendition of what heat therapy can bring. But the first time I had a chance to experience the heat, I was down in Costa Rica, and we were near the Arenal volcano region, and they offered something called a temazcal. I was like, interesting. This is about 12 years ago. And they're like, all right, basically you crawl in this brick igloo, and we put a lot of hot rocks in there, and you're in there for a couple hours. I was like, I like it. That sounds good. But I had no idea what was coming for me. And it was a traditional Mesoamerican shaman who was leading this traditional ritual called the temazcal. Now in North America, it's called the Inipi or the sweat lodge, and they're both very similar, just different prayers and different traditions. So we went in, and there's orienting towards 4 directions, and they have their medicine songs, and then the shaman and a helper, they bring in these hot stones, and then they close everything off. And it starts off, and it's pretty warm. And you're like, all right, I've been in a sauna before. I know what this is like, it's no big deal. And then it gets hotter and hotter, and the songs get more intense, and the prayers get more fervent, and I was like, okay. And then they open the door, and I'm like, wow, I got 3 more of these? Like, that's a lot, because that was about 20 minutes. And then in number 2, the second round, and for those of you who've been in one of these experiences, you understand how they build. And it's not just the physical intensity, it starts to change your emotional body. It starts to melt away layers that we've built up walls to protect ourselves from things that we no longer want to feel. So in the second round, you start to run up against yourself. As you come up against yourself in any meditation, or come up against yourself in any other ceremony, or come up against yourself in a workout, you start to go like, maybe this is a bad idea. Maybe I could just go outside or take a break. But you don't, and you stay in there, and that's the first victory that you find. You learn about yourself through testing yourself in that scenario. And so I remember that second round was more of a fight. No, I can do this, I'm strong enough. I've been through some tough workouts, I've had some hard things, I can do this. Very yang energy. And then the third round comes, there's more stones in the center, hot stones, and they're pouring water, and they're saying prayers. And I just start to cry. Where did those tears come from? I don't know. Where's it all coming from? Uh-oh. This just melted something away. And now there's a reservoir of emotion, something that I've kept stored inside, locked away, carefully quarantined from my psyche. And it just starts to pour out. And I can't describe where it came from or why it was there or what was coming. It's not like, oh yeah, that was the time when I was 7 and my dad yelled at me. No, I don't know. I don't fucking know where that came from, but it was there. And then from there, that's when I learned that, okay, just let that go. Like, let that go. And then the invitation for prayer came in, and I haven't been someone who's been known to pray except in the most extreme circumstances. I'm like, my prayer is like one of those little things on the walls that says like, break glass in case of emergency. It's like, pray in case of emergency. And this felt kind of like that. And so I was offering my prayers like, just help me get through this, through the tears and through the sobs. And then one more round, one more gate. We're 2 hours in this hot and dark and in this prayer and a beautiful female shaman who's guiding us through. And there was a strength, the sense of, after the emotions pass, a sense of like strength and understanding that like, wow, I'm capable of more than I thought. And we moved out, crawled out of that, what feels like the womb of the earth itself. And I went out, birthed into the world and saw the trees and saw the sky. And it was the first time that I'd seen the trees and the sky without taking any psychedelic medicine, which I have been taking for 21 years now. So I was versed into that sense of awe that you can get from a psilocybin dose or something that I've experienced in my first vision quest when I was 18, but never without the medicine, never with just the heat. And I came out and I just looked. And everything seemed new, As Jesus had said, behold, I make all things new. Well, that's what the Sweat Lodge did. And so that was my first experience, recognizing that this thing, heat, that's around us, and I've been in a bunch of saunas, and it was all about physiological, there was something much deeper at work. And so that's a practice that I've carried since that moment and through the North American tradition. But the interesting part about it is it's not about just what's coming up for you, it's about what's coming up with everybody in the circle. Because you sit in that circle with everybody, you go through that shared struggle, that shared difficulty, and all of a sudden everybody who's in there, stranger or friend, they become brother and sister. It doesn't matter. You've put yourself up against something hard together, and that forms a community, and it builds these bonds. And so when I go out to Sedona with my brothers or my brothers and sisters, we'll go into the Inipi together, and we'll come in and we'll have strong bonds, and we'll come out and they'll be so much stronger. And all the time you'll see these emotional barriers start to collapse. And that to me is where the real medicine and the magic comes. And then the sense of community that's formed, well, that's another huge, huge piece. Because if you look at what's actually happening in the macro, Travis Christofferson was on my podcast and he talked about it. And he was saying, what is the number one health crisis in the world? Loneliness. Self-reported loneliness. It's the feeling of loneliness. Yeah, we all got Instagram and we're all connected to thousands of people. It doesn't fucking matter. It matters how lonely you feel. And why do you feel lonely? Well, because you haven't exposed those vulnerable, tender parts of yourself. If you're walking out and you're all swagger and you're all exterior and you're all smiles, but inside you're hurting and you're hiding those scars that are behind your beard and the sadness behind your smile, if you're hiding that, well, you're gonna feel lonely because who's gonna see you? But in the Sweat Lodge, even though it's dark, everybody sees you. They see your tears, they see your vulnerability, they see your weakness. I remember one of my strongest brothers, he's an actor, he's like 6'3", Calvin Klein model, as good looking as it gets, about 260, just got cast as Jax in the new Mortal Kombat. He was in round 3 and he goes, I don't think I'm gonna make it. And I was like, it's all right, brother, you're gonna make it. But it was the vulnerability of that moment that was the first time that I've ever heard him have the slightest doubt in his voice and have everybody, all the brothers, go like, we got you. Like, we got you. Everybody put an arm on him. Everybody put a hand on him and hold him in that space. And then he made it through, and that was that amazing experience where we all got to see a part of him that we hadn't gotten to see. And we all got to know him and love him in a deeper and more different way. And the same can be said for the cold. So for anybody who happens to follow me on Instagram, it was a big thing that we, kind of all documented. I went to go to Poland with Wim Hof. Everybody know who Wim Hof is? So he holds 26 world records for cold exposure, longest time under the ice. He hiked Mount Everest up to the death zone in shorts. He's done pretty much everything that you can do for cold, and he's quite the character. The only thing that's not cold about him is his heart, because he's got such a warm heart. And I brought 12 people. I didn't bring them, actually. My friend Lewis Howes brought them. 12 of us went to Poland to go stay at Wim Hof's house. And the first challenge of staying at Wim Hof's house, his doors in Poland are about this big. So I had PTSD from hitting my head, for about 3 weeks after that. But really, we went there to experience the cold with the Iceman, with the maestro. And we came in, and I knew a couple of the guys, and we came in kind of close. And the first day, we jump in a freezing cold waterfall. And if you've been in cold exposure, cold water's cold, but running cold water is colder because it's taking that warmth off your skin and it's just rushing it right away. And it's fresh, new cold water on your skin every second. So there's no little bubbly insulation of your body heat that's keeping you warm it's just gone. It's like later heat, see ya. So we jump in there. And it was an amazing moment too, because that first time someone jumped, we had one of our brothers, his name's Humble the Poet. He couldn't even swim. He couldn't swim. But he trusted that there was enough of us in the pool. He's like, well, fuck it. If you guys are there, I'm going to jump in and swim. And that moment was rad, because it was not only the cold, but it was also pushing through that boundary. So we started to form that bond and that connection. The next day, we break through the ice in Wim's giant cold tub, because it had frozen over the top layer. And we sat in there for 10 minutes. And that's a long sit in freezing cold water, long one. And, obviously there's a breath part of this, which I'll get into as well, because as Wim says, the cold has been his teacher, the cold has been his guru. He learned to breathe from the cold, because when we jump in the cold, we start breathing. Well, that's the body's intelligence. The body's intelligence knows that if we actually hyperoxygenate, we'll be able to adapt to the cold in a different way. So after the breath practices, which again, like I said, I'll talk about, but we're in there and it's all of us in the pool. Now, I usually don't stay 10 minutes in the cold tub in 34 degrees or 3, whatever that was, where we had to break 2 inches of ice off the top. I don't stay that long, but with everybody in there, it was a different thing. And then we all just started singing and just making sounds. And there's people shivering and there's people struggling, but all of us in there together looking at each other and smiling and Hoka, let's go. We got this. And the maestro himself just beaming and smiling and going he has his kind of song he sings. It goes, and then he'll do his little Tai Chi thing. That's Wim. But we all started doing it and making beats and having fun in there. And it ended up being something that was quite intimidating, a 10-minute sit in this cold tub, to something that was radically exhilarating. And all the brothers got closer after that. And then the next day, the test was, how long can we stay submerged underwater? So in that same thing, breaking through the ice, how long can we stay underneath there? Well, I've had a lot of experience in breath work, so I was like, all right, I'm gonna really go for it. My record for staying under the water, and I always do this supervised with guidance, just in case some kind of shallow water blackout or anything weird happens, someone's gonna pull me out. So I'm mindful of that, but we had a lot of brothers there. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna push my limits. So we did the breath work in the morning, and I started to prepare. And I knew that for this, it was a different thing, because you don't hold your breath with force, with energy, because any energy, even the energy of thought, will use up that oxygen, and then you won't be able to stay. So I asked if 2 of the brothers would go with me in the water so I could hold their legs as I kept submerged, because I was holding a full breath. And I remember holding their legs. The 2 volunteered, yeah, I got you. I'll stand in that water for as long as you can go under. And I remember going under and wrapping my arms around their thighs and just getting to the most centered place of calm I possibly could. And knowing that I had this test ahead of me, it really drove me to that focused place where that point of resistance became the biggest ally. Because, if you're meditating and you just want to get still and you're like, I could do it now, I could do it later. maybe you'll go halfway, but when you know that you got that cold, which is merciless and righteous, that's waiting for you, well, you got to bring it. You got to bring it. So I centered myself. I got acclimated to the cold. I dropped under. I held my brothers, and I had people keeping time. Again, my record was 120. And I could just feel my heart rate drop, drop, drop. Stillness, stillness. Oh man, that feels good. Quiet, quiet. 1 minute. Quiet. Still. 1:30. And at 1:30, they knew that I broke my record. So they started getting excited. 1:30, and I could hear them getting excited. And I just gave myself a little smile. And the smile probably cost me some oxygen. So I know I could beat my record if I can keep my poker face. But then I kept still. And then 1:45, they really started going for it then. It was really hard to hold in the smile then. 2 minutes, and at 2 minutes, they just lost it. And it's a beautiful thing when you have people who are so excited for you, and that's a rare thing. We're so competitive in our world. We're so looking at someone like, you do this, well, I'm gonna do this. If you do this, well, I'm gonna do this. It's this kind of competitive nature where we're pitted against each other. Our own ego is out of control, wanting to be better than the person next to us for whatever reason, but not in this scenario. Up against the cold, we were all rooting for each other. 2:15, and at 2:15, people were going nuts. Like people were just going bonkers. And I was pretty much in need of some air. So I popped up at that moment. And to see the pure joy that everybody expressed at this accomplishment for me, that was incredible. Like to really, really see that. And I've felt that before too. But to be honest, I've had my moments of competition. I've looked at my friends who are killing it with a podcast or released a book and did this thing and been like, good for you. But inside I'm like, damn it, I want to do more than you did. And I can watch myself do that. But I've also seen the other. And I've seen the other with some of my friends who are athletes, some of the MMA fighters who I've watched go out there in the ring, that some of my brothers who've been putting themselves in a really vulnerable position. And also my friend and brother, Bodie Miller, who's an Olympic skier. I've been so passionately rooting for them to win that when they win, I guarantee that there's no way they could have been more excited than me at that point. Like to really feel that for somebody, to really feel that you can completely surrender your own ego to root for somebody, that's an amazing thing. And that's what I felt. And that's what we all shared for each other. It didn't matter on what time everybody got. That didn't matter at all. It mattered that we were there to support each other and root for each other, no matter what. And so the bond got deeper and deeper. And that was leading up to the final challenge. And the final challenge was to climb Mount Śnieżka, which is this mountain in Poland, without a shirt on. And it was freezing, sleeting rain that day. But at the start of the day, we're all kind of fired up and we got our we're ready. We're ready to go. And we start, and the start of the climb is fine. The first hour, people have their Instagram lives out. They're kind of like talking to each other. We're talking shit. One of our brothers, Steve Weatherford, he was wearing an American flag Speedo, and he runs up ahead and he pulls it off and he just walks up the mountain butt naked. And we're like, this is hilarious. This is funny. But then about 2.5 hours, we got our clamp-on spikes because it's all ice underneath us and ice hitting our skin. We're like, damn, we still haven't even hit the summit part. And then the maestro, Wim Hof's like, all right, we're about to hit a part of the mountain where I call it the whip, because the wind gets up to 60-mile-an-hour gusts. And it's still sleeting. And we're like, damn. And at that point, it was a different thing, because we were able to kind of breathe our way through and laugh our way through and talk our way through. But when that wind hit, it didn't even make sense to talk. And then it was a matter of a fight. It was a real fight. And that's an interesting thing as well, because whereas the submersion was a matter of surrender, 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 this was a matter of, I'm gonna fight. I have to fight. I have to grit my teeth and I have to fight. And everybody just on their own, step after step, climbing up the mountain. And I remember at one point, I lost my spikes on one of my feet because it got to be a snowy section. And I didn't realize that I lost a spike. And I was like, fuck, I am fucked. I got one spike on, I got one spike off. There's no way I'll be able to make it up. And I don't know where I lost it. And so I'm like, I'm really screwed here. I'm like halfway up between that summit stretch. And then one of my other brothers came up and was like, is this your spike? And I was like, yes. Still had to take my gloves off to put the spike on, which was not fun. But we all made it up to the top, and then we all came down. And at that point, we all trusted each other in a whole different way. We trusted our ability not only to support each other, not only to push ourselves through hardship, but to really actually push through different challenges. And if you look at the tribal initiations across the world, I mean, there's tribes that you put your hand in an oven mitt of bullet ants and just let it bite you. But what does that do? That engenders trust. It knows that if the hard times get hard, that you'll show up. And the result of this was not actually physiological benefit, because cold is a hormetic stressor. And with any hormetic stressor, at any dose, it can become no more a hormetic stressor, just purely a stressor. So 10 out of the 12 of us got a chest cold. So it wasn't healthy, but it was worth it, because we all know each other now in a whole different way, in a radically different way. And we know that we can trust each other. And on our text chain, it's one of the most active chains I've had, because we went through this initiation together. And through that initiation, we got to know each other, and we have a community. And none of us feel lonely anymore. You know, like a lot of us had a lot of close community as well, but we know that we have this group that we've been through something. And I have other groups like that as well, through the sweat lodges and through the initiatory rituals in Sedona. And there's something really beautiful about using these elements to learn about yourself and to bond yourself with your brothers and sisters, to fight off that feeling of loneliness. And then, of course, the breath. The breath is another tool that we all know to breathe. You know, the study of pranayama is thousands of years old. And even taking 6 deep breaths, there's a Japanese study that shows that 6 deep breaths is enough to change your blood pressure, change your physiology. I talk about that a lot in my book. It's not 1, it's 6. Let's just all do that together. Let's take 6 deep breaths and see how we all feel. Y'all ready? I love doing this with crowds because the room feels different, right? Can y'all feel how like everything feels different? Collectively, our energies just changed from 6. Well, that's the minimum of the doses of breath that you can take, but then you start adding more and more on top of that. Breathing, as Wim says, belly, chest, head, belly, chest, head. And you start pushing yourself into a state of radical hyperoxygenation. And in those states, just like in the sweat lodge, emotional walls start to melt away. You start to see things, feel things, emotions start to come through you and out of you. Tears start to flow. And again, maybe you know where they're from, maybe you don't know where they're from, but they'll come. And it's about, will you let them come? Will you let those lonely, scared parts of you, will you let them release? Will you let those walls open so the medicine of the breath can come, carry those through and lift them back out and give them back out to the mystery? Like, are you willing to do that? And that's breath, and it's available all around us at all times. They haven't figured out how to charge for breath yet. They might, I don't know, but not yet. And it's something that's available, and it's one of the greatest tools that we have for getting to those deeper layers. And so with all of us there, the combination of the cold plus the breath that was bringing up all kinds of different things, you know, people acknowledging who've accomplished incredible things, Super Bowl champs, people saying that they've never been proud of themselves and they've never really loved themselves and they didn't actually really release and surrender to loving their partners or their children or whatever the thing is, or they haven't forgiven somebody, or they have all of these things come up just from the breath. And that brings us even closer together. That's another one of those medicines. But the last medicine that I'm going to talk about before I open up to questions is a medicine that was very recent to me, and that's the medicine of darkness. So I heard about these darkness retreats from my friend Aaron Alexander, who wrote a book. And then I had randomly, not so randomly, I had someone on my podcast talk about going to a darkness retreat in a city near Frankfurt. And I was like, darkness retreat, I've been reading about this. In Czech, they call it therapy nui. It's used in psychiatric medicine to treat some different conditions. It's been used in mystical literature for thousands of years. Again, in one school of Tibetan Buddhism, you stay in a dark cave for 49 days. But the key with the darkness is it's not like a little bit dark. Like a little bit dark doesn't do you any good. That's like a little bit cold or a little bit warm. It's like annoying. Like it's a little bit cold. I should get a sweatshirt. It's a little bit warm. I'll wear a tank top. Like doesn't really make a difference. And the same with the darkness. Like a little bit dark, that's like gonna just drive you crazy. But that might be a good thing. But absolute dark, absolute dark is a much different thing entirely. So I go to this room, and the room set up has a little bathroom. I start to memorize the room, put all my little things around the room. I have a bed, I have a yoga mat, and then I have a place where I'm gonna eat, and then I have the bathroom, and I memorize it, figure it out, and then they say that they're gonna bring the food to me, and it's gonna be in this completely blacked out dark hallway outside the room, and they're gonna ring a bell, and they're not gonna tell me what time of the day they're gonna ring the bell, but it's gonna be sometime roughly accordingly, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I'm gonna stay in there for a week by myself, in the silence and in the darkness. And the rumor was that, and the reports were that starting around day 4, somewhere around there, you start to have visions. And I was like, I know a thing or two about visions. We'll test this theory. But I was called to it. I was called to it like the first time I was called to ayahuasca. I was called to it like the first time I was called to the vision quest with psilocybin when I was 18. I was called to this medicine, and a lot of people were being like, man, you're crazy. You're gonna go crazy. Like, don't do this. This is a bad idea. I was like, I think it's a good idea. But I don't know why yet, but I just feel called to it. And I wanna know, like, is that really gonna happen? Because the endogenous production of DMT in the brain hasn't been proven, because I believe, and there's probably some doctors who know better, I believe that to understand that you would have to have a vivisection of the brain at the moment someone is experiencing the endogenous release of DMT, and that hasn't really been done. It's kind of been done in a rat study that kind of indicated that. But it's what everybody who's followed this tradition says, and I've experienced DMT as a psychoactive component in ayahuasca and in Vilca and in a variety of different forms, and in mimosa and in a variety of different forms. So I understand what DMT looks and feels like, so I was curious about that. And they say that what happens is the first few days, you have a flood of melatonin, and somehow melatonin precipitates the production of this DMT. It's necessary to have a flood of melatonin in order to produce the DMT in your brain. So I go in, and as they say, the first few days, I'm able to sleep a lot. And I'm not a great sleeper, but I'm able to sleep a lot. But it was very, very uncomfortable, because it's dark and it's quiet and I'm alone. And when you're dark, quiet, and you're alone and there's nothing else going on, it's just your mind versus your mind. So I catch myself in what I started calling mentalbation, because I'm just going over the same shit over and over and over again, like a mentalbation with no climax. Just like the most frustrating experience. And then I realized, I came in and I had some things troubling me, and the way that the mind goes, it's like, well, you got things troubling you inside. If you fix all these external things, that'll fix all the internal things for sure. So I was like, I got it. I gotta move my house. I gotta do this thing in business. I gotta do this thing. I gotta do this and this and this and this. And I have this whole fucking plan that I'm memorizing and I'm laying out. I was like, don't forget, this is the fucking plan. And then around day 3.5, so it happened a little bit sooner for me than some. I don't know why, but I start getting flashing lights in my eyes. And these flashing lights start coming, and I go, that's weird. That feels like something's happening. And then I start to see the visions. And for anybody who's experienced ayahuasca or any kind of DMT state, it wasn't like the peak state where everything's coming at you in a rush, but it was this kind of flowy state where I had access to all kinds of different things. And sometimes they were quite profound. I had a vision of the Buddha that came. Never seen the Buddha before. And the Buddha comes in this shining, resplendent gold. And I was having kind of a tough time. That's probably an understatement. And the Buddha comes, and I look up at the Buddha, and the Buddha's smiling. I go, and I'm pretty sad. I go, Buddha, why are you smiling? And Buddha goes, why aren't you smiling? And I was like, oh, good one, Buddha. And then Buddha starts laughing. And I go, Buddha, why are you laughing? And Buddha goes, why aren't you laughing? I was like, oh, nice. And what else do you say at that point, you know? So we just looked at each other for a moment and then faded off. And I can't explain that. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's an idea of my mind. It's an extrapolation that my brain created in order to explain to me the Buddha nature in a way that was more creative and more clever than I could have actually thought on my own. Or maybe it was something else. I don't know. But the effect was the understanding of the Buddha nature, the choice to smile, the choice to laugh at this giant, beautiful game that we have the opportunity to play. And then another vision I had, which was a bit more intense. So my father, he lost his mind about 8 years ago. And he started hearing voices, and the voices would tell him that he was the Messiah, and the voices would tell him that the world was ending, and that he was going to save the world, and the voices would tell him that people, even myself, was an imposter, and all of these crazy things. And ultimately, it was a challenging position because I had to enter the house because my stepmom and my little brother, they were scared, and I had to enter the house, and I had to let the SWAT team in, and the SWAT team had to taser him in front of my family and take him away. And a very challenging experience I had mostly a very good relationship with my father up until this thing it's not like it snapped. We could see it in hindsight, but we thought it was just some eccentricity of him talking, and then it just happened. It did. There was a tipping point. Anyways, I've done my best to make peace with that and done a good job and worked through my own practices of meditation and love to just always send him love and to keep a candle lit for him and keep his picture of him smiling, holding me on my altar and remember him. But I saw him in the darkness. I saw him in the corner of the room, and he was reading a book. And I said, Dad, what you reading? He said, the Book of Lies. I said, Dad, why are you reading that book? And he closes the book and he says, because I never believed I was enough, son. I never believed I was enough. And he throws the book over his shoulders and he says, my son, know that you're always enough. Know that no matter what you do, you're worthy of love. No matter what, for who you are, no matter what. And you'll never have to read the Book of Lies. And I said, thanks, Dad. And it was one of the most powerful moments that I can remember and really opened up so many emotions. And what was the medicine that I was on again? Nothing. Darkness. Darkness. That was it. And whatever my brain was producing that allowed this massive understanding and healing to come between me and my father. And then communication with, business partners that I was having conflict with and former lovers and different people. And I was able to access so many different things until finally, I saw a vision of my mother, and I recognized that I never really let my mom love me. Like, never really. Like, she'd always loved me as unconditionally as a human that I've ever known. And my grandma came from my grandma who's tattooed on my arm. That whole lineage just loved me so purely. But I didn't let them really love me. And I realized that because I didn't love myself enough to let them love me. And we're all the arbiters, the judges that decide how much love we're willing to receive. And that's from ourselves, and that's from everyone else. And if we don't feel like we really deserve it, even someone who's constantly showing that love, we're not going to let it all in. And at that moment, I really broke down and realized, wow. My mom, who when someone, now that I've had some success and built on it and done the book and the podcast and all that, someone will find her out on the street or call her up and say, aren't you so proud of your son? And she'll look them right in the eye and go, what do you mean? I've always been proud of my son. What are you talking about? She loves me that much, but I still didn't really let her. And that was a really profound moment. And people ask, did the darkness break you? Yeah, the darkness broke me. It broke me then when it put me back together. And it made me realize how much love was available and how much love was all around me and the fact that I didn't let it in. And I was ready to let it in now. I'm ready to let it in again. And the darkness was 6 days, so this is a very shortened version of what that brought me. And it's a hell of a technology because you have to keep out every little smidgen of light and have someone delivering food in a blacked out room, and you have to do that. And I will tell you, you do not get better, or at least I don't know, maybe y'all are better than me. I did not get better at all figuring out where shit was in the room. I ran into everything all the time. I'll tell you the worst one though, check this out. I come out of the shower, and I'm like, there's a nice rug, like this rug. And it was in the middle of the room, smaller than this though. And I was like, I'm gonna stand on the rug because it's cold. It was near Frankfurt and it's in January. And I was like, let me dry off my feet. But what I didn't realize is I pulled my chair out from where I was eating dinner. So I was like, I just gotta dry my legs off. Bang! Oh man, that was bad. Just straight out of the darkness, just back of the chair right on my head. Just like, ugh. And so you learn that to be a little bit more mindful of all the things. But I certainly didn't get any better at any of that. But it's a technology that, as I shared from just a fraction of those massive moments, that's available to us. And maybe you have to find the Temescal or find the place where you can access the cold or find the darkness and do a little bit of work, but it's around, it's available. And there's so much medicine to be had and found in so many of these different practices. So, as you guys explore all of these amazing technologies and all these brilliant minds, I guess my piece that I want to offer is to just look for the medicine in everything that's always around us and know that at the right dose, the cold, the breath, the heat, brotherhood, sisterhood, community, and the darkness itself, the everything and the nothing, it's always there. And ultimately, the goal is to point you to that place of love. The ultimate medicine. No medicine better than that. Not anywhere. It is medicine. The capital M medicine. And may you all, in all your ways and everywhere you go, may you always remember that that's the medicine we're all really looking for is love. So may you have all the love in the world. Thanks, everybody. So we have some questions that are going to be available right here.
Everyone line up if you'd like to ask questions, and we'll get through who we can.
Hi, my name's Marissa. I have 2 questions, if that's all right.
Please.
So my first question is, do you think that each of those medicines or ceremonies that you went through, the one that you did first lent itself to the subsequent ones? Do you think it would have changed if you did them in a different order?
As far as going from the cold to the darkness, or
your
from
experiences and what you took away from each one of them?
I think that the order of them was less important than the actual surrender to the depth at which you needed to go to each of them. I don't think it's like a series, like a puzzle that you have to solve this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, necessarily, but they all do support each other. So I would think of it more like a circle rather than a straight linear pattern where you have to hit one domino, then the next domino, then the next domino. It's more like collecting little Boy Scout or Girl Scout badges. Like, okay, I got the hot badge, I got the cold badge, but it's not for the validation of it. It's just to know that you've learned as much as you could from that at that time, but you can always go back and go deeper and go deeper and go deeper. I just scratched the surface on the darkness, and I'm just getting into the base levels of what the cold and what the heat can teach me and what breath can teach me, and I know that, but so I'll go back and I'll see what else is there. But yeah, I think they all have ways that they support each other, and the key is just to go until you've learned what that medicine can teach you.
Thank you. And my second question is, do you think that the emotional barriers that you broke down in each setting, they were different but the same, if that makes sense. Like, and then
Yeah.
when you came out of each of those settings, were you able to put up less of a barrier when you experience new things?
Yeah. So I think, yes, they are. They're different. They have different flavors, different sources maybe, but it's all the same root, which is some contraction, some protection that we made from some feeling of loss of safety or loss of love, particularly loss of love. That's the hardest one, because I got in a gnarly car accident, which was certainly not safe, and bare scars and dead teeth and a variety of cosmetic adjustments to my nose. But I'm not like, I almost died, but that's not the thing that I'm really still working on. What I'm really working on is the emotional stuff, those points where I felt love withdrawn from me, from my father, from anybody else, felt like love got pulled away. And when those feelings of love, that strongest desire, the thing that really allows us, that we crave the most, when that gets pulled away, it can create really traumatic experiences. Not to say that external loss of safety and these things can be incredibly traumatic. Of course, PTSD is very well known and studied and can absolutely do that. For me, it's not that. For me, it's this feeling of removal of love, and then being willing to trust love and trust that I can love life enough that it's okay that I'm gonna have to let it go. That it's okay to love life so much knowing that I'm gonna die and I'm gonna have to give it away and go on to this next transition. And I think that's where a lot of this fear comes from is, we've experienced these temporary losses of love, and then we're like, now you love something too much, it's gonna get taken away, so just don't love it all. That's what our silly brain says. But then we've just denied ourselves the true joy and medicine of life itself, which is to love and experience love. So that's really what most of this is, and it may come from different sources, but it's largely that feeling of being willing to trust love, knowing full well that at some point the source of that love in the physical manifest world, you're gonna have to give that up because time will take all of that from you. But perhaps the source of that love in the universal, macro sense, the source of love itself, we might always have access to that, and that's what I believe. So it's just understanding that. But I'll tell you this, I got out of the darkness, felt wide open, and then I went to go make a text message and talk to people, and I was like, this is intense. So I was trying to figure that out, and I was like, okay, maybe tomorrow. And I had to actually build a little bit of callus back just so I could operate, just so I could handle it, And I think that's part of the thing. You can get blasted wide open, but I couldn't even operate from that level at that point. I wasn't ready to, because everything else was I felt too vulnerable. I was too stripped away. So I, with my own awareness, just all right, some calluses are gonna have to form. But there was so much healing that happened underneath that it's okay that I wear, a little protectant on my skin. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, all right. So what would you see to be the biggest catalyst for human evolution, for the new state of what our potential can be? The biggest catalyst for that?
I think the biggest catalyst is going to be community. I think it's going to be what they've called a satsang, what they've called a group of like-minded individuals coming together. This is one happening now in a certain degree, but I think it's going to be the bonds that are formed from getting back to this deep calling that we had, where we have somebody that we can be radically intimate with and expose and peel off all the layers and all the things that protect and project and try to show something that isn't, and just show up and be like, this is me. Here's the basement with all the shit and all the greed and all the lust and all the jealousy and all the competition and all that. Here it is. You still love me? Oh, phew. Good. Because and then I see yours too, and I still love you. And then we start to get comfortable realizing that we're all the same, man. We're all the same. Like, we're all the same. We all have the same fears and we all have the same stuff. And every time I share something vulnerable, it's always like, thanks for sharing this. I've been going through the same thing. Like, we're all so much more similar than we think we are. And there's so much in the zeitgeist about creating these divisions, these lines, even the way that a map is drawn. This is this country and this team and this race and this gender and this thing. Okay, but what about like team people and team soul? Because it's all the same when you really get down to it. And the more we're willing to like open up and have a community and a container of people that can hold that, the more we'll trust that. And then we'll start to love ourselves. And when we start to love ourselves and start to love each other, then maybe we'll start to love the earth, and maybe we'll get to keep this game board around a little bit longer. Because if we don't love ourselves and we don't love each other, well, then this place we're living in is hell. And if you're in hell, you might as well burn it to the fucking ground. And I think that's the way people are right now. They're so sad and they're so lonely that they're like, fuck the earth. I don't care. This place sucks. I'm suffering. It's a terrible place. Let's just destroy it, and that'll spare people the pain. But that's not the truth. This is a fucking beautiful, magical place. And if we just learn to love ourselves and love each other, we're going to want to take care of this place. And so I think that's really the catalyst, starting with that sense of love, which comes from being loved for the entirety of who we are. And to be loved for the entirety of who we are, we got to take everything off and be like, here I am. Love me or not. And we'll find the people who can love me for the wholeness of who we are. Good question.
So this question is based on the different modalities of plant medicine. This is from personal experience. Working with these medicines have produced profound experiences, obviously. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, the integration is even more important than the medicine itself, or taking the medicine itself. What you do when you come back to real life, mm-hmm. society. How do you stay integrated when you come back from these medicine experiences to not go back into those same patterns that we get sucked back into? How do you keep the magic alive? What do you do? What do you do to keep that?
It's interesting because I think it's dynamic systems theory that talks about one of the laws in dynamic systems theory is that things have a certain orbital pattern, and it takes a massive amount of force to break you out of that orbital pattern. And there's going to be lots of forces that are going to suck you back into that same orbital pattern. And that's why people point to integration, because these experiences are enough to dislodge that pattern and help you create a new orbit, but it's fragile. Because all the people around you, maybe the other substances that you've had around you, maybe the other energies that you've had around you, they're going to try and pull you back into the old self that you are, right? Because they're going to see you as that old self until you show them for long enough who you are and maybe find a different way. So to integrate is absolutely important to create that lasting change. Otherwise, we will find ourselves in the same pattern. And I've certainly done that. I've certainly gone and had this massive experience and been like, nothing will ever be the same again. And then like a week later, I'm like, shit, it's the same again.
Yeah.
Damn it. So I've had to go back a lot, and I've had to do it over again. And I think really giving yourself time to be away from the forces that are going to pull you and draw you back is really important. That's the wisdom of the ayahuasca pre-dieta and post-dieta, right? It's like keeping your energy, giving it enough time to settle in that you don't actually fall immediately back. And that's where some of the longer ceremonies, I think, have had some value, like the darkness. Because even iboga, which is the longest plant medicine that I've done, which is 18 to 24 hours, that one's pretty interesting because it is very long, and so you're immersed in that for a while, which helps you stay there. But the darkness was so long that it has this kind of, you're almost integrating every day, the next day, and the next day. So it's helpful for that. So that's one of the things that I think why the darkness I call my most powerful journey. It's because the integration was somewhat built in, because I had 2 more days in absolute darkness to integrate that vision of my father and integrate the vision of the Buddha, integrate the love of my mother just in the darkness. But the other tools are just to go off in nature and just be around nature, because nature itself has a resonance that is encouraging us to heal and break patterns. And there's things that I think are really helpful there. I think the things that you really want to stay away from are getting back into your same social circles, rushing back into your same patterns of habit and behavior and stress and this kind of stress response, stress addiction we might have. And so the things that have lasted the longest for me are when I really give myself the time, and then also develop practices that I can use that will bring me back into those states and do those regularly. So for me, breath work has become one of those practices, like constantly. It's like they say, before enlightenment, draw water, chop wood. After enlightenment, draw water, chop wood. It's not like you're going to hit this state and stay there. You got to keep doing the work. Keep cleaning, limpia. Keep cleaning. And that's really what I've found is I haven't really been able to give myself massive gaps. Every once in a while, I'll give myself a trip to Patagonia on my own, or a time with nature alone and writing in the journal. But for me, it's about the process of cleaning and remembering, and breath work, flotation, meditation, cold plunge. All of these things can remind me of these experiences that I've had, and then, other ceremony work, of course. But it's really the stuff in between that just keeps it fresh in my mind. But in an ideal state, you would have that plus plenty of time. And to me, I think, one of the best tools for integration is either stay with the people that you were with in transformation, or go out to nature, which can support all manner of transformation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Have a beautiful rest of the conference. Everybody, hug somebody today. That's what I say. Have fun. Love you guys. Thanks.